Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hey there, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to today's episode. When an employee leaves their employer, comprehensive knowledge transfer to remaining colleagues is always a critical desire, but more commonly a major failure. Most companies either wait too late to focus on it, or they do an abysmal job in executing the process. The downside of this phenomenon is that both teammates and the company find themselves placed in a very vulnerable position to try to continue company operations at an optimal level. This negative impact is tripled when long-tenured employees leave the company. High stress levels, frustration, and anxiety are frequently felt by all. To help us more deeply prepare for tenured employees transitioning out of the company, our guest today is Ms. Laurel Rutledge, founder of the LKR Group and host of the Rutledge Perspective radio show and the Alignment Vision Action podcast. She's also a subject matter expert in change management, leader development, and workforce optimization. She has a unique background in people strategy and analytics, internal audit, consulting, and risk management. And with all those super skills, Laurel brings a well-rounded perspective and a real-life case study on our topic today. She also shares additional gems on leadership execution, something you definitely don't want to miss. So be sure to listen to her addition to our leadership execution playbook and my closing segment called Karen's Take, where I share a tip on how to use insights from today's episode to further sharpen your leadership acumen. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, my superstars. Welcome to today's episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. Boy, do we have a treat for you all today. I am so pleased to have on today's show a very dear friend, a sorority sister, and a tremendous leader in her own right, Ms. Laurel Rutledge of the LKR Group. So welcome to today's podcast, Ms. Laurel.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be awesome. I'm so excited.
It is going to be awesome. We could talk all day, as you know. Yeah. So are you ready to crack open that leadership playbook of yours and be ready to share a couple tips with us?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, wonderful. Well, to start us off, for as much as you feel comfortable, I'd love to give the listeners just a little bit about your personal background, kind of where you grew up and your story there, and then tell us a bit about your professional story to date.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And so
Me too.
I actually grew up in Odessa, Texas. So for those of your listeners who know Friday Night Lights, yeah, that was my high school. Friday Night Lights was my high school.
Oh my gosh.
My dad was my principal and everybody knew him. He passed away in 96. But we were at that game that was in the movie, and everything that you saw was real. It has some issues still. It's Odessa. It still has issues, but one thing that is real from a football perspective is people still do have season tickets, and their kids have been gone for decades.
Wow.
And they pass them down in wills and all that. I mean, it's a serious thing. It's football. But what was more important to me about growing up in Odessa, not only that, but I grew up South Side. It's a typical town that has a North Side and a South Side. I grew up on the South Side of the tracks. Everybody knew, my parents. I went to a predominantly Black and brown junior high school until they started busing us. I know I'm dating myself, but they actually started busing us. And my parents were all about education. No matter what was going on, they were all about education. And so I remember in ninth grade, I actually went to ninth grade half a day, and I went to high school half a day. And I really thought I was going to graduate early and go to medical school and be a doctor. And that's not what I ended up doing. I did end up going away to school, and was so excited to get into Rice University, and it ended up being a horrendous experience for me. It was great in
Oh.
terms of some people that I still know. They're still very, very good friends of mine. But from a personal perspective, it was a really horrendous experience. And I
Why
ended
was
up
that?
transferring. Rice is an interesting place.
Okay.
Um,
Just the dynamics
it
there.
is,
Mm.
yeah, it's an interesting place. Let's put it this way. It was a long time before they admitted women onto the campus, and
Oh,
an even
yeah.
longer time before they admitted anybody who was not white onto the campus.
Gotcha.
And so there was a time when a number of us went to a party and were actually followed back to our dorm by campus police asking us why we were on campus. So
Oh.
that's the Rice that I went to.
Mhm.
And it just, in hindsight, it just was not the place I was meant to be. But I was so caught up in, you get invited to go, and it's such a great place, the Harvard of the South, and there are some really great things about it, and there's some great people there, and I still have some really dear friends. It just was not the
Nice.
place and the time for me. And so I
Gotcha.
ended up going to University of Houston, um, graduating in accounting, mainly because my dad was like, honey, I know you want to graduate in psychology, but I need you to get a job when you get out of school.
Our
So
parents, right?
parents, and I get that, right? So I did
Right.
accounting, and it actually, in hindsight, turned out to be one of the best things in terms of being able to be an HR person, because my
Mm-hmm.
undergrad is in accounting. I knew getting out of school, I wanted to go back and get my MBA. I wanted to work for a number of years and then go back. So I looked at
Right.
all the schools I wanted to go to see what the average work time was that got admitted. I knew I wanted to go out of the state of Texas to go. And
Yeah.
so I was able to get a consortium fellowship to Indiana University, Kelley School of Business, which
Wow.
was one of the first schools that started the whole cohort thing, right? Where the
Hmm.
professors move in and out and you stay with your group.
Right.
And graduated from Kelley with a MBA with a concentration in operations and international business. I finished it in Spain,
Mm.
and three of my four classes were in Spanish. So I had to learn Spanish very quickly so I could get
I
out.
bet.
So, and I was in Barcelona. So not only were they
Mm.
speaking Spanish, but they were speaking Catalan. So I had to learn
Yes.
all of that kind of stuff. And then wound up doing consulting and internal audit, and worked at Deloitte for a long time. And that's when the whole Sarbanes-Oxley thing happened, when Enron collapsed.
Hmm.
I was actually at the Houston office when that happened, and we shared a parking garage. So I saw people walking out with their boxes.
Wow.
And that's when I knew I did not want to be a partner in a professional services firm,
Mhm.
because you're in business with every other partner in a
You
professional
are.
services firm.
That's
And it
right.
just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I left from there doing some risk management in some places, and wound up in Batesville, Indiana, of all places,
Wow.
working with Hillenbrand Industries, the casket company, and the medical devices company. Really strange conglomerate. They had you from the womb to the tomb,
Yep.
which I knew was great for me because my best friend and I say that all the time. And that's where I got into HR, because the leader of HR for the casket company was seeing me in all these board meetings, because I was there as their director of risk management, seeing me in all these board meetings. And I had decided, you know what, I've got to go. One, is snowing, and two, they're not really ready for enterprise risk management. And so
Yeah.
I'm being paid really well, but I'm being paid well to be an assistant, right? I'm
Right.
just taking down notes, and that doesn't make any sense. What do I want to do? And I'd started thinking about HR, and this leader, VP of HR for the casket company, happened to see me at the end of a meeting and said, have you ever thought about HR? Because I always look for good business people who I can teach HR stuff to. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wonder of wonders. And that's how my career started. I mean, just Batesville, Indiana, with
Yeah.
a phenomenal HR leader who is still a dear friend of mine today. He's in Florida
Really.
now, and so we're still
See,
connected.
they just
um,
identified that brilliance in you and can make the
yeah,
connection, which is rare, that a lot of
yeah.
leaders do that. And one of
Hmm.
the things I've been most impressed about your background is because you do have that rare combination of the business side and the people side.
Hmm.
And you have been successful in your corporate career through that. And then you've used that knowledge and insight for your consulting business
Yes.
as well. So, you're just a triple threat. That's all I can say,
Thank you.
in my opinion, anyway.
Right, right. No, I love it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah.
Well, Laura, I really wanted to ask you before we get into what you're doing now in your consulting practice, just in your opinion and in your history, what do you think it takes for individuals to lead at the top of their game? What kind of characteristics do you think or help make them successful?
That's such an amazing question because as I've worked with leaders, one of the big things for me is really being clear on who you are, right? You got to be clear on who you are. You got to own your own stuff because none of us is perfect.
That's
But the
right.
second thing is making sure that your words and your actions align because
Yes,
people will listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do. And you
that's
can
right.
say things all day long, but if your actions say something different, that's what people are going to resonate with is how you make them feel. If you tell them one thing but do something different, they're going to start acting towards what you do. And
Mhm.
so, really great leaders who are truly leading at the top of their game are transparent, they're authentic, they communicate well, and they always make sure their actions align with their words. And when they don't, they call it out before their people do,
Mm,
and they
good
they
point.
change or act accordingly. Yeah,
Yeah, great point. Excellent point.
yeah.
And I know in your practice, because it is so diverse, you've seen probably the best of the best and probably a little bit on the worst of the worst side as well.
Yeah, a
But
few.
just
Yes.
tell me a little
Mhm.
bit about your practice and what you focus on and how you help people and organizations be better.
Sure. So my business resonates around four questions: who you are, where you are, what you want, and what it's going to take and you're willing to do to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that gets down to being really aligned, being really clear on your vision, and then moving into empowered action. And so, as I work with people, I start them at the very beginning: who are you and where are you? Because if you don't know that, then no matter what you say you want, it's going to be very difficult for you to make a plan, to make a strategy, to move into action there. Because if it's not aligned, it's not going to feel right. And so,
That's
what
right.
I've found in my history in working with lots of leaders is many times when there's this disconnect, something just doesn't feel right. They're unhappy. It's not where they want to be. They're not leading well. They're not communicating well with their teams. There is something that is not aligned for them. And if I can get people really focused again on their root system, right? What are those things that
Mhm.
ground you? What are your key strengths? And what are the things you can deliver to the world? And then
Mhm.
align that with the work they want to do. It's so much easier for them to then show up and stay where they are and dig back into their strength, or make a definitive plan that it's time to go, right? Not
Mhm.
just being mad and hurting them because they're mad at somebody else, right? Don't hurt you because you're mad at them.
That's
Make a
right.
plan, know if it's you or if it's them, and then move accordingly because we all have choices. We
We
all have
do.
choices.
We do.
Yeah.
And where do you see a lot of individuals struggle or stumble, as they're trying to kind of figure this out for them? And we all have
Hmm.
moments in time when we're not
Yes.
quite as sure about our next steps as where
Hmm.
we want to be. What are some common areas that you see that people stumble that you have to like coach them through or, give them advice about?
Yeah, a big one that I see with people is this inability to really hear what they're saying, right? So we get
Mm,
so caught up in responding, right? We're not listening to understand, we're listening to respond. And
right.
even when I'm working with them, I use a lot of repeating. Here's what you just said. Did you hear
Mm,
what you just said? And so often people don't even recognize that they are talking themselves out of or into situations that are untenable for them just through their words and through their actions. So, a
mm,
big piece that I've seen that's a stumbling block is not paying attention to what you're really saying. Just pause,
mhm,
take a minute,
mhm.
really think about what you're saying and how the other side is going to hear that. Not that you have to sugarcoat things, but you need
Right.
to be really, really clear and know what you mean and really mean what you say.
That's
Right.
right.
So if you
That's
can
right.
do that, then it's going to be so much easier for you to ensure that things are going well. That's a big one for me.
That is
Um,
huge. That is huge.
yeah. The other thing that I notice too is people just get tired. They get so
Mhm,
tired. And
mhm,
when they're tired, they have an inability to think as clearly
mhm.
and to move as clearly.
That's
And
right.
so that fatigue and the pressure around that fatigue, right? We hear a lot of hustle and grind. You're not working hard enough. You got to be here longer. Why are you leaving so fast? We get that in our heads, that head trash that says,
Mhm.
well, if I work a little bit longer, if I say a little bit more, if I do a little bit more, when what we really need to do is just stop.
Yes.
Just stop.
Yes.
regroup. If you need a mental health day today, take that mental
it.
health day before you say or do something you can't unsay or undo.
That's right.
And then come back, right? So listen to what you're saying and then take the time that you need when you're really overexhausted. Those are the big ones.
No, I love that. That is so meaningful. And a lot of times we don't stop and regroup. And I know in my book, I have a whole chapter on becoming a leadership athlete. It is
Yes.
not easy to be a strong, effective leader all the time. It is exhausting for your mind, body, and soul. And there's some interventions that you have to create for yourself to make sure that you are optimal when you need to be, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
which
And
is
it's the
really
art of
important.
saying no, right? You can
And that's
say no.
hard.
And you don't have to,
I'm
unfortunately, we
guilty.
think we have to be ugly, right? To say no. You don't have
Yeah.
to be ugly to say no. Sometimes
Yeah.
that no is, okay, so I've got 400 things on my list and
Yeah.
you've just added 401.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about what's going to come off the list, right? That's a no.
That's true.
That's a
That's
no.
true. Or my favorite is, although it's not ideal for me at this time, let me think and
Yes.
brainstorm if there are other resources that I can point you to. Because
Yes,
I'm so weak about
exactly.
that. I want to help everybody, but it is exhausting, and you don't
Yes.
get to focus on the urgent things that you really do need to prioritize.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And we own everybody's stuff. Don't
we
stop owning
do.
everybody's stuff, especially HR people. We do
We
not own
do.
everybody's stuff. We're not the party planners. It's not
That's
our job to
right.
plan all the parties,
That's
right?
right.
And we don't own the culture. And so for your HR people,
Mm,
we are not the owners of the culture. The company
no,
owns the culture. The leaders in the business own the culture. We
mm,
are the stewards of the
that's right.
culture. We help them recognize when their words and actions don't align with the culture that they say they want, but we
That's
don't
right.
own it. So don't let
We
somebody
don't own
put
it.
on you stuff you don't own.
That's right. You'll go
Stop.
crazy trying to solve something that's not solvable from your,
Yes.
role and level
Yes.
accountability.
Right. Right.
I'm curious, are there any myths about leadership that people fall into believing, or um, what are some of the misconceptions that you hear when your clients are saying, "I want to be a stronger leader"? Are there any things that kind of pop out that they
Yeah.
feel leadership is, but truly isn't?
What I see and hear a lot is a misunderstanding of the difficulty
Mm-hmm.
and the pressure the higher you go up in the organization. So people
Yeah,
see the shiny ball, right? They see the big office, they see the time off, they see the money, and they
yes,
think,
that's right.
oh, well, you get to sit back and just have everybody else do the work.
Right,
What they don't see is the additional level of pressure because there's so much more you know.
that's
There
right.
are so few people you can actually have in your circle that you can talk to because the
Hmm.
information you have can be so sensitive that having it get out before it needs to be can really be detrimental, if not sometimes a compliance issue if you're talking SEC, right? and
That's right.
and disillusionments or getting rid of pieces of the business.
Mm-hmm.
People sometimes don't understand about being really careful what you ask for. Go talk to people who are really in the role that you aspire to. And don't talk to them about just the work that they do every day. Talk to them about what it feels like to be in the role every day as that leader, the pressure
Absolutely.
that rises up,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is so spot
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, because what
You
people
need-
forget is that,
Mhm.
yes, responsibility may roll down. Everybody's responsible for their stuff, but
Yeah,
accountability ultimately rolls up. So the
it does.
higher you up you go, the more accountable you are for everything that happens below you, whether or not you know it. You
That's
are
right.
accountable for it, and there's a lot of pressure with that. So don't get shiny ball syndrome, right? It's not all it's cracked up to be.
It
Yes, the
sure
money
isn't.
can be good, and you might get invited to things, and that's awesome. It's nice to be
Yeah.
out there, but remember what you got to deal with on a daily basis.
That's so correct.
Yeah.
You are one of the few guests that have such a well-rounded background, and a lot of the guests that we've had are, in a specific sliver, but you've
Mm-hmm.
had, like as mentioned, with the business side and the people side of business.
Yeah.
I'd love to like pull back that layer of the onion just a little bit,
Sure.
and maybe do like a case study. I know
Sure.
you've had a lot of experiences
But I'd love to give the listeners some insights on how they can approach certain things. So I believe you were involved in, a succession planning initiative in an industry. Tell us about that, because I want to help people understand, some real world case studies and how you went about it. It's your way, right? Your insight that you used in this particular way, and there are multiple ways probably to tackle the problem you were trying to solve. But I'd love to hear how you were thinking through solving it and the results of it.
So yeah, thank you for that question, because I often find, especially as you move up in organizations or if you cross organizations, if you go into older functions or older situations, companies that have been around for a very long time where people have long tenure, there's a tendency to hire people by saying, hey, we want new information, we want new perspectives. But then when you get in there, it's like, well, they haven't seen it, so it can't be possible.
Right.
So in this particular instance, we knew that we were facing a cliff. We were facing a significant cliff, a retirement cliff.
Mm.
And the organization had been around for a very, very long time. And we were trying to decide what we were going to do to address it. Now, as HR people, and because I'm a business person, I've been talking about this for a while, trying to do real succession planning. How do we look throughout our organization, even demand studies? What are we going to need based on strategy, not based on what we feel, based on strategy? And so one of the things we came up with was we said, you know what, we need to know when people are going to retire. We need to understand so that we can plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this organization, we were talking about some really, not only senior people, but some very specific knowledge, because it's a chemical company. There's some things that were developed inside that were very specific to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So what we decided to do was put together what we called an early notification of retirement program. And when we first did it, it was like, oh, that's not going to work. We can't do that, because it was an organization that every time we got into some kind of issue, they would do a voluntary separation program, right? They just pay people lots of money to go away, and then you hire them back as consultants. I mean, it was just bad processes, but it was historic, right?
Right.
So we said, no, we don't need to do that, but we do need to know. So what can we put together based on data to come back and say, okay, from a financial standpoint, if we do that, here's what that means for us from a company, from a financial standpoint. HR people, you need to be able to talk the finances of the business. Here's what happens from a financial standpoint. From a people standpoint and institutional knowledge standpoint, here's what it does in terms of giving us an opportunity to make sure we can pass on that knowledge transfer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we don't get caught, for lack of a better term, with our pants down when people just leave.
Right.
So we started putting all this together. We did some detailed succession planning. Here's who we think would leave. Here's what it looks like in terms of age. Here's what happens. I mean, we did all of the data, people analytics, right? We did all of the data. We came up with this program, and we said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give people an opportunity to tell us up to a year in advance, and they can decide, do you want to take a bonus at the end, or do you want to start ticking down your time? Right? For succession planning. You want to, at the end of the year, you just want to work 2 days a week, or you just want to work 3 days a week. And when we presented it, it was like, we can't do that. There's no way we can do that. That's not possible.
They didn't even give it a try, huh?
Didn't even give it a try. We can't, nobody's going to, you know what? I'm out, right? I'm like, stop. Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about what's going to happen. Because number one, we think it's going to cost us this much for a voluntary separation program. Well, guess what? When people leave who've been here this long, who are in a pension plan that's now frozen, and you're hiring new people, even if you hire them at really high salaries, you've got a significant decrease in your long-term costs, right?
That's right.
There's some cost for those people. We've got a significant decrease in that, even if you're hiring most senior people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got to start. HR people, you got to start with the numbers, right?
That's right.
So we got them over that numbers hump. Then it was like, well, nobody's going to want to take the decrease. Nobody's going to want.
How did it go?
Not been paying attention. When people retire, one of the biggest fears you heard was that, oh my gosh, I'm going to die when I retire. What am I going to do? People get really sick. They don't make it, 3 years past retirement and they're gone. And people were having a hard time easing themselves into, because remember, we had the recession, 2007, 2008.
Right.
So easing into retirement. So we finally got it passed. After 4 or 5 times where we rewrote history, we finally got it through. And what we were able to find out is when they got it done, about 50% of the people decided they wanted to take the trickle down of retirement. I was like,
shut the front door. Are you serious?
I don't even have to say I told you so, because see, this ain't my first
Yes, you
rodeo,
did.
folks.
Yes, you did.
Right? But from that succession planning standpoint, what that enabled us to do is say, you know what, now we've got 12 months. We can not only take these people who are earlier career people and who've been complaining about all these blockers, right? That they can't get another job or a bigger job because we got all these blockers. We can actually now plan to realign the organization, to make jobs bigger and broader, to have conversations with earlier career people to say, I know you say you want a director job and this is the role you want, but guess what? That was a director job because it took all this time to learn how to do it and it was all manual. Now you push a button. That's not a director role. But if we add all these other things and you're really learning, maybe it is a director role. So we were able to have some really meaty conversations about what roles meant. We were able to have some meaty conversations with people about what is a critical role and what is a key role, because those are two different things.
That's
We
right.
were able to really design a process that said, if nothing else, we now have enough information to get ourselves prepared to not be caught flat-footed when someone who is in a key position leaves and takes all that institutional knowledge with them. And so we as HR were able to put in place some things to help them understand how to do knowledge transfer, to how to plan for them to be gone. We were able to work with our benefits people and our legal team to say, you know what, we absolutely can do this under our SPD, because what we're saying is your bonus is you're going to get to work part-time, but we're not going to give you part-time benefits or part-time pay. That's your bonus. We're not going to cut anything that's financial to you, except you're not going to have to work those 5 hours a week or 7 hours a week or, whatever it is, 7 days a week. You're not going to have to do as much of that. You'll be able to work down. And so we were able to build a real succession plan around key roles, around key opportunities, because we thought about what does the business need? Where is the pain in the business? And how can we creatively address that for a way that works for the people, i.e., I want to ease into retirement, and works for the business? We don't want to have to spend as much money as we would spend if we were doing a voluntary separation program. And by taking both of those into account, we were able to put in place a process that they're still using, apparently, from what I understand.
Because that's such an amazing intervention. We talk about organizational effectiveness. This is a perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing that case study. It's a perfect example of the power of when you align people strategy, data with business strategy and data, right? It empowers the organization for the long term. It made the employees a lot more happy. It gave them choice, the power of choice, right? It helps solidify your employer brand, because believe you me, I'm sure they talk to their family, friends, colleagues about what you all were doing, right?
Yes, they did.
That is absolutely amazing. And so I do encourage our listeners, if you are in a company or organization, such similar to what Laurel's describing, is to really do take an opportunity to think outside the box, do your best to support knowledge transfer, be astute with the needs of the business and the organization, and I bet you'll have a big win if you take a chance on some creative initiatives such as that. So that is awesome.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation today with Laurel Rutledge, founder of the LKR Group and host of the Rutledge Perspective Radio Show and the Alignment Vision Action Podcast. Links to her bio, her entry into our leadership playbook, and additional resources can be found in the show notes, both on your favorite podcast platform and at leadyourgamepodcast.com. And now for Karen's take on today's topic of knowledge transfer of terminated employees. Today, I wanted to share just a few tips on how you can best ensure effective knowledge transfer happens when a valued employee leaves your team. My first tip is to make documenting processes an ongoing priority. Don't wait until you receive a resignation letter to try to capture the years of knowledge an employee has gained while working at the company. Require your staff to document essential functions of their role via standard operating procedures, and make a point of updating these SOPs every performance review cycle. My second tip is to encourage collaboration and cross-training so that more than one person knows how critical processes are run. Consider including formal mentoring or job shadowing programs as part of your talent development processes. This will do a double duty of both ensuring knowledge transfer while also making employees very happy that you are investing in their personal development. And my third tip is to conduct what we call stay interviews with your employees on a regular basis. Stay interviews are one-on-one meetings that you have with your employees where you have frank conversations about their current level of work satisfaction, and you try to determine if they might be looking external to the company for another opportunity. Try to make sure all employees feel valued, especially your long-tenured ones. It will really pay off in the end. So listeners, if you enjoyed this topic, more info on developing stronger leadership acumen can be found by clicking on the signature program link on our website, shockingly-different.com. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week. Bye. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.